Days since Nottingham Forest did something absolutely titting mental. About, it's like 6 minutes to be honest. Now you know the age-old question. If a tree falls over in the forest but there's no one there to hear it, does it really make a sound? The answer, yes. Because Evangelos Marinakis will be there to make an official complaint about it. Nottingham Forest have been a weird football club in the last 12 months. After points deductions and near relegation, they decided to just magically become good this season just gone and qualified for a European spot. But now, over the summer, after snitching on another Premier League team and going to war with Tottenham, all with an owner who has as many run-ins with the law as Aaron Ramsdale has relegations on his CV. It really does beg the question, what the hell is going on at Nottingham Forest?
Where the fuck are my sunglasses?
Where would they even be? Guys, I'm not gonna lie, I lost my sunglasses. I don't know where they are. The days of Narin may be over, but there's a new side character involved now. This is like Nuren, I think. We're running out of vowels. Nah, I don't need these. We'll keep it normal for today. I mentioned my knee. When we get to 750,000 subscribers on this channel, I will be testing it out again. So make sure to head down below and subscribe if you are new, and slap a like on the video. 6,000 likes, and I'll sort out a video for the club that has the top comment in this one. So why have Nottingham Forest been in the news? Well, Tottenham found some money in the back of Ange Postecoglou's trousers that are in Lost and Found and decided they were going to activate Morgan Gibbs-White's release clause at the club, a move that of course doesn't really give Nottingham Forest the right to reject an offer because it's a release clause for a reason. They want to sign the Forest starler, and I don't blame them. Morgan Gibbs-White is an absolute baller. However, Nottingham Forest are alleging that they did this illegally without consulting or getting permission from Nottingham Forest before making the bid and talking to the player's agent. Let's be honest, Daniel Levy's just out of practice signing players. He forgot that you even had to do that beforehand. Either that or he just accidentally activated it, like whilst he was scouting the player. That seems like the most logical thing to me. He's probably secretly glad if this doesn't go through that he hasn't got to pay the money. It's a weird situation. It's raised eyebrows for other Premier League fans. Evangelos Marinakis clearly absolutely fuming that Tottenham have activated a release clause that he quite literally put into Morgan Gibbs-White's contract in the first place.
What is the charge?
A succulent release clause. Forest will be arguing that that clause was actually for two separate players. It was for Gibbs and for White. You see, you don't know them. They're both in the youth academy. Forest actually cannot go like 17 minutes without doing something absolutely batshit crazy. I just know Chris Wood will be attempting to defend his teammate when Tottenham's recruitment team come to Nottingham to finish off the deal.
Get your fucking hands off him now!
Meanwhile, Marinakis, he'll probably be dragging him back to his own office to physically drop the people's elbow on him, given his previous track record. We'll come to that later. To be honest, they're saving Rodrigo Bentancur from himself, at the very least, if this deal doesn't go through. He's gonna have a difficult time explaining to everybody else that he's seen two Dominic Solankis at the training ground. We know that he can't tell the difference between us ethnics, so Forest fans are absolutely fuming at this kid over on Twitter already. But I have to remind you guys, yeah, this is the same guy that left Wolverhampton Wanderers, a team whose youth academy he came through, in acrimonious circumstances, then went to Nottingham Forest, scored against Wolves in a penalty shootout, and celebrated directly in front of him. This is a team that arguably made him who he is today, and he doesn't give a fuck, mate. He would probably sell his own auntie just to get a higher rating on FIFA. That's very judgmental, actually. I don't know this kid at all. Either way, if this deal goes ahead, yeah, James Maddison, I'm sorry to tell you, bro, it's over. This guy cannot compete with Morgan Gibbs-White, Lucas Bergvall, and Mohamed Kudus coming in to play pretty much the same sort of territory as you. It's been a difficult week in terms of departures for Nottingham Forest. Anthony Elanga signing for Newcastle for £52 million. It's a big move for Newcastle, but Forest fans will be even more angered when they see that Anthony Elanga was posing in a Newcastle kit with William Asula, a current Newcastle player, last season. I'm not gonna lie, the club will be threatening to make an official complaint about that one as well. Well, they didn't ask us whether he could wear their shirt in a mirror, but that is only the half of it, ladies and gentlemen. That story is quite literally only the first part of all of this. So as I said, again, this Morgan Gibbs-White situation is Nottingham Forest taking legal action over Tottenham approaching their player after activating his release clause. Now, on the face of it, that does sound stupid. Allegedly, what Spurs have done is wrong, and this has happened before. Crystal Palace did this with Chelsea over a deal they tried to make happen with Michael Elise, and basically Tottenham have gone to the player and the agent before, technically asking for permission to talk to him, even though they have like actually activated a release clause. This is actually a rule that I didn't know was the case either. I thought once you did a release release clause, that was it, fam. It feels like that should be the case. If you put the deal on the table, at that point, the guy's released, surely. But no, according to Premier League law, you do actually have to get permission from the club to then go and actually have a conversation with the player about personal terms, which does make sense. So for this situation, whilst it's like relatively unheard of, and it does feel like Forest kicking up a stink, I think the real reason why this is getting so much traction is because of what Nottingham Forest were doing earlier on in the month, and that was snitching on Crystal Palace. Now, if you don't know, somehow, Crystal Palace managed to earn their way into the Europa League group stages by defeating Manchester City in the FA Cup final at the end of last season. It was a fairy tale situation. Crystal Palace have never won a major trophy in their club's history. They went toe-to-toe against Pep Guardiola's Man City and defeated them thanks to one of the club's legends already, realistically, in Eberici Eze. They have some cult hero players. They'll have future Barclaysman players when we look back on this team. The likes of Jean-Philippe Mateta and Ismail Assar, Michael Elise from last season, Mark Gay. These are all players that we're going to look back on fondly in 10 years and go, man, that was like the new Wilson Palacios. I don't know why I drew for him. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is it was quite a feel-good story, but there was one thing rumbling on in the background, and that was the multi-ownership laws that surround a UEFA competition at the moment. Basically, in layman's terms, going to break it down, you can't have two teams that are owned by the same group compete in the same competition unless you file and kind of like speak to UEFA beforehand. The deadline for that being March the 1st. If you say own, I don't know, let's say Man City, for example, easiest example. Man City, the City group own Girona and obviously Manchester City, right? So if they both ended up in the Champions League, they would have to go to UEFA and basically confirm, right, this is the situation. We're signing the required documents that allow for both of these teams to now simultaneously compete in the competition. Nottingham Forest caught wind of the fact that Crystal Palace, or John Textor, who owns the Eagle Group, which is in charge of Botafogo, has overall control really over Olympic Lyon and at least a 40% share in Crystal Palace. They found out that he hadn't done the required paperwork before the deadline. So when Lyon qualified for the Europa League, as well as obviously Crystal Palace, as I mentioned, already being in the Europa League, Nottingham Forest snitched to UEFA about them. That is exactly what happened. Now, where this starts to get a little bit more shady is the involvement actually of Lyon themselves. Lyon, again, if you don't know, were at risk of getting relegated from Ligue 1 after failing financial rule sets in France. Again, I'm trying to keep this as basic as possible. They needed to raise funds, really, in essence, because they're in so much debt. They've been losing so much money under John Textor's ownership. They needed to fucking sort themselves out, and Ligue 1 knew that. Now, bear in mind, again, John Textor also owns Botafogo in Brazil. It was slightly weird when Nottingham Forest announced the triple signing of 3 players from Botafogo. Now, whilst these are good players that I'm sure will enhance Nottingham Forest, and also they have shopped in Brazil prior to this as well. You got Murillo, Danilo, Renan Lodi, I think came from Spain, but he's Brazilian as well. There's a few little Brazilian players that have rocked around Nottingham for whatever reason. I don't know why they'd want to go there, but it's not like Sao Paulo. Nottingham ain't like Rio de Janeiro, guys. It didn't raise too many eyebrows at first. It only started to when, again, you looked into the fact that that money could then be utilized by John Textor and siphoned away from Botafogo to help Lyon in their impending case. Now, if Lyon managed to reverse their relegation from Ligue 1 and provide the funds necessary, they would be able to stay up in Ligue 1. They would then therefore keep their place in the Europa League, and that would mean that Crystal Palace weren't allowed to compete. What does that mean for Nottingham Forest? Well, that would promote them from the Conference League to the Europa League in Crystal Palace's place. Now, I'm not, suggesting that there's any foul play here, but there's a big reason for some foul play here. Nottingham Forest, in buying 3 players, in essence, from Lyon, because it's the same ownership, that money can be moved over. The reason Lyon are in this mess is because John Textor had been siphoning money from Lyon to Botafogo to help them win titles in Brazil. The exact same thing can happen in reverse in order to save Lyon's status in Ligue 1. And that is seemingly exactly what it did, or at least it very much contributed to it. Lyon were then able to stay in Ligue 1. It meant that Crystal Palace couldn't play in the Europa League, and instead Nottingham Forest replaced them. Now this is where I draw a line. Snitching is bad. Don't snitch, yeah? Snitchers get stitches, in it. Can't snitch on people. Can't snitch to the feds. That's exactly what Nottingham Forest did here. That's already, if we see you on the streets, it's over, yeah? You're getting elbowed. But then to actually send money, in essence, over to a club that needs it in order to confirm that that team therefore can't play in the Europa League is it's borderline criminal, guys. I'm not gonna lie to you. Whilst it's clever and intelligent, it just feels like it goes against the spirit of football. And I want to preface, I've already said everything. I've already said bare things I wanted to say. I actually like Nottingham Forest, okay? For those that don't know, I grew up in Nottingham. I went to university in Nottingham. I have a lot of friends in Nottingham. And I always, you know, said at the time whilst I was living there, it would have been sick to have Forest in the Prem. They're a club with a lot of history. You know, they've won multiple European titles. The Brian Clough era, you know, they've been very successful in English football. To see them kind of languishing in the Championship, obviously it could be worse. There's a lot of teams in worse situations than them. They were actually pretty stable, to be honest, in the Championship. They were there for about fucking 20 years. But to see them in the Championship with a, you know, very big fan base in a very cool city like Nottingham was always frustrating. And so when they got promoted, I was a massive fan of that. I'm pretty sure everyone was as well. The team that they've managed to build is really, really fun, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later. But it is just a shame. I don't want Nottingham Forest fans who are watching this video to think that I have an outright despise for your football club. I have an outright despise for kind of what's happened in the last year, really. And what it also does is highlight the problem with multi-club ownership. And this isn't Nottingham Forest's fault. This is, to be honest with you, also partly the fault of John Textor. It does get a little bit murky when you consider the fact that John Textor didn't actually have a majority share in Crystal Palace. So Crystal Palace, I think, should definitely appeal this, because I think they could actually get it reversed. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's not like John Textor with Leon and Botafogo. He basically outright owns those. He only has a part to owning Crystal Palace. It shouldn't really be taken in the same way. But either way, I hate multi-club ownership models. I know Liverpool were getting involved and thinking about getting involved in it. I don't care who the clubs are involved. It's ruining football. It's constantly depriving smaller clubs of playing in competitions that they have earned their way into and deserve to play in. It's not just Crystal Palace that are the victims of this season. A club called DAC Streda, who play in Slovakia, have also been ousted from the Conference League. That because their owners also own Győr, who play in Hungary and would be playing in the same competition. And it's also happened with Irish side Drogheda, who were going to be in the same competition, the Conference League, as Silkeborg. Their US-based Trevella group also own the Danish side. What happens when Manchester United finally qualify for the Conference League and OGC Nice are already there, also in the Ineos group? You know, it's constantly hurting the smaller team. I'm not being funny. Red Bull Salzburg and RB Leipzig were once in the same Europa League group. So these lot are allowed to compare E numbers a few years back, but Drogheda aren't allowed to finish bottom of a Europa League group. It just, I hate it. It doesn't make sense. It constantly benefits the big clubs and the big corporations. Gianni Infantino must have been loving his 7 crates of Red Bull that he got as a bribe just to keep them in the competition. Anyway, as I mentioned, from a Nottingham Forest perspective, it's just scummy. Like, Snitching as a whole, you have a hater in me, but it is just scummy. Like, Crystal Palace have won the first trophy in their history, yeah? Now they've got to play a team called Torpedo Belal Jodino in the Conference League. That isn't rewarding. That's a punishment, bro. Either way, game week 2, Crystal Palace v Nottingham Forest is going to look like the front lines, bro. There's going to be a brawl in Rock City after this one.
Spidey senses tell me this is going to get fucking tasty, baby.
At least Pep Guardiola will be happy seeing that justice has been done after the handball that completely robbed them in the FA Cup final.
I'm so happy, believe me.
But the thing is, if you're surprised about what's going on here at Nottingham Forest, you shouldn't be. They're owned by Evangelos Marinakis, whose name I've mentioned quite a few times in this video already. He is one of the characters of all time. You see, this man's been involved in more scandals than Mario Balotelli on crack cocaine. Let's start off with Nottingham Forest. All right, now, Evangelos Marinakis took over at the club. He bought the club back in 2017. That was 8 years ago. They've done a lot since then. Most notably, they've had a lot of managers. Since the start of 2017, we've had Gary Brazil. He was then replaced by Mark Warburton. Then Gary Brazil came back again. On the 8th of January 2018, now making 4 managers in the space of a calendar year, Aitor Karanka took the role. Now, he was one manager that actually had a decent amount of longevity at this football club, being a year. He was replaced by Simon Ireland as caretaker for 4 days. He was then replaced by Martin O'Neill. Martin O'Neill had the role for 6 months and was then replaced by Frenchman Sabri Lamouchi. Sabri Lamouchi didn't do the greatest job, only a 34.5% win record. That wasn't enough for Marinakis, who sacked him 2 months into the season. Chris Hughton would then take charge for the best part of 11 months before being replaced by Stephen Reed and then Steve Cooper on the 21st of September in 2021. And then upon promotion to the Premier League, he was sacked and replaced by Nuno Espirito Santo. Now, obviously, Nuno is still in charge right now, but that means that there have been, 10 managers since Marinakis took charge 8 years ago. And that statistic was looking far worse before Steve Cooper and Nuno, who relatively speaking have been in charge in terms of Sir Alex Ferguson numbers, 2 years apiece. And not only that, but there's also been controversy amongst those managers. Obviously, Nuno Espirito Santo had a bit of a run-in with Marinakis at the end of the season just gone, despite how well Nottingham Forest were performing. And in October 2024, he was also banned for spitting at a match official. He was banned for 5 matches, even though he tried to claim that he was just ill and had a really bad cough and was only spitting at him because he was coughing. Get ready for this man's excuses, they're pretty good. Now, if you're a fan of Greek football, you'll know a lot about Marinakis because he also is a board member and owner at Olympiacos. First of all, back in 2011, he got into a scrap with Gibbs-White that left the Frenchman beaten up by Olympiacos fans. Marinakis, though, was not found guilty. He also then had a massive part to play in the 2015 Greek match-fixing scandal. A prosecutor secretly recorded a selection of conversations amongst high-ranking Greek officials, where Marinakis was then helped by the president of the Greek Football Association to pick referees for Olympiacos matches. After a long and arduous case in 2018, he was found not guilty of that, but, I mean, you know, there's only so many things you can get involved in and be found not guilty and not lead a little bit of a paper trail behind you. He also then entered a referee's dressing room during a match in 2014 to confront him over refereeing decisions, something that's strictly prohibited across basically world football. He apparently went in there to wish them good luck rather than threaten them at all, and the game went from being 1-1 to 3-1 to Olympiacos by the end of the match. Meanwhile, in March 2018, he was charged with drug trafficking. This is even to do with football, this is just extracurricular activity. This after the interception of a boat carrying 2.1 tons of heroin back in 2014. Now, once again, he was acquitted from this case. In 2021, a judge found that there was no evidence or a lack of evidence to actually link him to this crime, but there's quite a lot of stuff, and for a man that does have quite a few political connections and connections to, again, high-ranking officials within Greek football, questions maybe have to be asked as to the validity of these acquittals. As I said, though, all of it was acquitted, and factually speaking, he was proved not guilty. He's also done some good as well. He donated €1 million in 2018 to victims of Greek wildfires and donated €1.8 million to a Greek hospital in Athens to fund 12 new intensive care beds. But I think the point I'm trying to make here is, basically speaking, we shouldn't be surprised because this man is a bit mental. And I think that's what I want to come on to. And again, I touched upon it earlier, is the fact that I feel bad almost for Nottingham Forest fans because it's not their fault that this stupid shit is happening constantly. To be honest with you, I'm torn really about the Europa League stuff because whilst, yeah, it's snitching and whatever, at the end of the day, it's not fans' fault, but you kind of have swindled your way into a tournament that you now don't deserve to be in. Crystal Palace's chairman, right, was basically saying that the reason they didn't actually file sort of the paperwork that they needed to was because UEFA never even emailed them about it, because Crystal Palace aren't expected to qualify for European competitions, so they didn't even have any correspondence from UEFA. You basically ended up in a European competition because someone at UEFA didn't send out the right emails to the right email address, and to me that's not what football should be about. That's not what football competition should be about. To be honest with you, I'm kind of conflicted again because Forest have been so good this season that they kind of also do deserve to be in the Europa League, but the football that actually happened indicated that they don't. Either way, what I'm trying to say is I feel bad for Forest fans because it's not their fault this stupidity's happening. I also feel bad for Forest players. This is a really cool, likeable group of footballers. Yeah, Langer and Morgan Gibbs-White might be leaving, but there's still some really cool ballers left. Their centre-back partnership is class. I love Milinkovic and Murillo. They've got some really cool characters like Ola Aina, who genuinely, his Snapchat is maybe the only reason to have that app installed on your phone as an adult, unless you are on a register somewhere. The story of Chris Wood is amazing. Callum Hudson-Odoi's revival has been sick as well. Elliot Anderson's one of the most underrated midfielders in the Prem, and it's a shame that the club's decision-making and outward speaking ends up reflecting on them. It's chaos. It's kind of unadulterated Southern Europe chaos, though. You know, like Turkey and Greece are just outspoken on everything football-wise. It's kind of that vibe. Like, even when they got wronged with VAR, right, and they just kind of went out of their way and, like, did a whole Twitter statement that was just bare incriminating, got them fined massively. I kind of rate that side of it, but everything else that goes along with it has been a little bit foolish in my opinion. But let me know what you think about the Nottingham Forest situation down in the comment section below. Do you back them or do you not? Do you feel sorry for Crystal Palace at the fact they're not going to be in the Europa League? Drop that down below. As I mentioned, make sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel, and of course hit the like button if you did enjoy this video. You can also follow me on social media. It is at @officialfng on Twitter and on Insta. But it's been a pleasure ranting at you guys today. Have a wonderful day, enjoy yourselves, and goodbye.